what does gutsy mean to you?
Oh, well, I have a sign in my office, and I wish I had been prepared for this question because fear is something I think that we every day we have to fight off. And putting yourself out there in places like this, and even on social media, is a challenge because you're vulnerable. And I would say gutsy is speaking your truth and believing what you say. And I'm grateful for people like you who value that.
Welcome to the Gutsy Podcast, the show where you learn how to own what you actually want and shift the mind junk that's been holding you back. I'm Laura Ora, keynote speaker, coach, and your guide to help you get clarity, build confidence, and make the gutsy moves that change your life. Each week, I'm going to help you simplify things by teaching you how to get out of your head while stepping into action. This way you can achieve all those life shifts that you've been overthinking. Your desire, that drives you. But gutsy, that's what gets it done. Our hormones and our gut play a significant role in the way that we feel, think, and function as human beings. Yet somehow they're two topics that are rarely taught and trained how to properly manage. So today, we're going to talk to a registered nurse, Angel Turlington, to gain a better understanding of endocrine disruptors and simple practices and methods that we can take to rebalance our bodies from the inside out. Angel is a passionate wellness advocate who empowers women to make positive changes in their lives. She emphasizes the importance of reducing toxin load, optimizing hormone health, and prioritizing self-care. With over 2 decades of experience in women's healthcare, Angel is a registered nurse and women's health nurse practitioner. She also holds numerous credentials in aesthetic and anti-aging medicine. She's a big believer in progress over perfection and offers practical advice to help women nourish their minds, bodies, and souls through all stages of life. And speaking of nourishing women, one of the most simplistic ways that you can help the women in your community and in your friend group is by passing along information that has helped you. So first, if you've not yet already, hit subscribe on the Gutsy Podcast to make sure that you get first notifications when new episodes air. And second, click the share button and send the Gutsy Podcast to a friend or a loved one in your world that you know could benefit from taking better care of herself, mind, body, and spirit. This very simple act that takes just a couple of seconds helps us to reach more women to make the gutsy moves that ultimately change their life. I love today's episode so much because it's such a relevant topic that I don't know about you, but it just feels like there's 5 million pieces of information out there and only none of it makes sense. Angel breaks it down in a way that makes sense. So let's get into it. Hey, Angel, welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Laura.
Absolutely. Today we're talking about a topic that one is a really hot topic on basically every platform known to mankind right now. But finally, right?
Okay.
Finally, we're talking about something that every single woman on the planet has lived with for all of eternity, but now it's finally coming to the forefront. So I'm excited to get into this space to talk about hormones with you. But first, I want to get to know who you are. So talk to us about who you are, what has led you to where you are right now in this lifetime.
Well, I think that's always an interesting question when you define yourself as a female, right? Because you're kind of a little bit of everything to everyone,
Yeah.
which is some of the my thought processes in our conversation today is how we first have to discover what direction we want to go, and then we have to find a lot of balance along the way to be successful in these endeavors. But I am a certified women's health nurse practitioner, and I have been in medicine and been in nursing for almost 30 years, 29 years, if that dates me. Clearly, I might know a little bit about menopause right now.
A little bit.
But I was lucky enough to have three children, all boys, which I always joke and say God knew what he was doing by giving me three boys because I've taken care of women my whole career.
Yep.
So I've had built a medical practice early in my career with my then husband, and he was an OBGYN, and we provided women's health care within that facility. and I got sort of casually bumped into and was introduced into aesthetics in 2003. And and at that time, we only had two aesthetic products FDA approved on the market for injectables, which is kind of where things started in my region in North Carolina. And I am a native North Carolinian and East Coast girl. And so I eventually built a sort of what I like to call a side hustle of aesthetics, which I really honestly didn't think was going to be any more than just almost maybe a hobby or something different or unusual, or it just was. I didn't understand it, and nor did I know that, wow, what was coming in the aesthetic space, like OMG, I mean, now you have a med spa on every street corner. And yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. Anyway, eventually I separated and divorced, and along that way built an entire business, if you will, within the structure of his business that was ultimately spun off after we separated. And now I've been in my own freestanding business for I don't know, 6 7 years, and providing aesthetics. And in the aesthetics arena of 2003, you can do the math. That's what, 19 years. I've aged with all of these ladies, mostly ladies, and I just felt like it was my calling to bring back my roots, which is women's healthcare, into the aesthetics arena. Because not only have I aged with my patients, but my patients have aged. And I felt like I was doing a disservice to them not to share how to age gracefully with hormones, as well as with other wellness and biohacking and other pursuits that go outside of what we can do in the aesthetic field for the outward appearance of the aging process. So we are now offering aesthetics and wellness services in my business in North Carolina.
Amazing. What a beautiful journey, and I love this calling to come back to yourself, right? To come back to your roots. I just always find I like asking this question because you can often see the thread and how things pull together into the season that you're in life right now. It's just really beautiful. So I like how your roots in your, what you were doing in the original practice has come forward and how you're helping women today.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky enough to have been in the same area because I was the business owner, and being in the same area, like I have that long-term relationship. Some of these people I even had a relationship with as a medical provider. And so 20 years in the space, you serve, I guess, if you will. I mean, that's what working with the public is. And in healthcare, I think a lot of people never really appreciated my aesthetics business as being healthcare, but it is still considered medical in a lot of the aesthetic space. And it is a lot of responsibility. And yet it's also very passion driven for me because I have really seen aesthetics grow and change and support and provide women with a lot of opportunities, just in the fact that I know that when you look good, you feel better.
Right.
To a certain extent, and then personally, I had to overcome all of my own triumphs alongside of them. And as I'm learning how to keep myself optimal, I just felt like, gosh, I have to share this with these folks, and this is even before the menopause discussion, because there is a lot of history that goes into the changes that happen with your hormones along with your lifetime, and the environment that you live in and the health habits that you follow.
Absolutely. It just always blows my mind that hormones, it's something that we all live with every single day. We're all on our own individual cycles simultaneously together, and yet we are just not taught anything about them, right? We're not taught in schools. We're not taught by most medical providers. Like it's just this, it feels like anyway, from my one singular perspective and in the groups of women that I've been in, it's like this thing we find out afterwards, right? We have to go on our own journey to figure it out. We have to find these pockets of information. And then often by the time we're doing that, it's because we're already in the midst of something that's causing chaos in our life.
Right, exactly, exactly. And little do we know all of the daily insults that we're being exposed to, if you will, that are causing more hormone turmoil, as if, dealing with partners and jobs and children aren't enough.
Right. Well, that's actually one of my questions for you is like what are some of the hormone disruptors that you're seeing? Like what are some things that we wouldn't even recognize are stuff that's disrupting our hormones?
I think the number from EWG, which is a wonderful resource, environmental working group, is that women are exposed to about 167 chemicals a day.
Mm.
And it starts in your bathroom, I mean, quite honestly. But anything that is fragranced is a hormone disruptor. So, start that list in your mind. And then from there, you have certain, flame retardants that are on your clothing, hair care, your personal care products, just the list goes on and on. But then you go into the kitchen and it can be plastics that you're drinking from your plastic water bottles. It can be food sources, because we have certain things that have even we forget that animals are also being exposed to hormones. And it just there's a laundry list that is overwhelming, and it can be overwhelming to people, especially because I'm in aesthetics. And in this last piece, I have been very cautious about, saying first place to look is in your bathroom and start whittling away. And there also, environmental working group has a very nice resource, but there's also a really cool app that's called Yuka, Yuka. And it's a free app, but I actually pay for it now. And it's what I love about it is it has a little scanner bar code, where you can scan barcodes, and it will tell you if said product has an endocrine disruptor ingredient in it.
Wow.
And I mean, you can even scan some, like I scanned a seltzer water one day. I mean, you can scan, all kind. It's not got everything, but it's great to take to. I mean, I took it into one of the health food big chain stores that happens to be owned by Amazon now, and I couldn't find. I mean, I had probably had to scan 50 products to find a clean product that was meant for the body. And I
Wow.
can't even tell you that I was looking individually. It was more of a game I was playing with myself. But it is great for people to be able to take it. Imagine teenagers, starting to teach the younger women, I think is part of our responsibility. I don't have daughters, but I think not responsibility, but it's a gift that you can give to a young woman to think about all of these frou-frou stores that are at the mall, that they probably shouldn't be buying that stuff because it's going to make their hormones change.
Right. Well, and when you're young like that, you think that you're invincible. Like it's not going to happen to me. That's way down the line. Like, listen, that shit sneaks up on you. I mean, you're young and free one day, and then all of a sudden you're thinking about like, I really need SPF on my face every day, or
Right.
I really need to not be putting this super highly scented product on my skin, right? Like you think, when you said start thinking about the laundry list, that's literally where I started. The laundry. We think about
Exactly.
our detergents, our soaps, our shampoos, fragrances, perfumes, lotions. I mean, we're just in our, correct me if I'm wrong, but our skin is one of our biggest absorption. Like it's where we're absorbing the most stuff, and we're just rubbing all of the stuff on us every single day.
Exactly, exactly. And think about what we did in 2020 when we rubbed hand sanitizer all over our hands, and we completely, which is a really new, interesting, emerging science that's coming out, but we started to, not only were we absorbing the fragrance that was in those hand sanitizers, et cetera, we also were disrupting the skin microbiome and the skin integrity, which means you're absorbing even more
Yeah.
those harmful things. And so I remember having that inner struggle with myself not to get into my car and always hand sanitize, that we are meant to be viable with withstanding humans that can manage these things unless we are, you know, immune compromised.
Right. When
Um,
you said start in the bathroom, can you can you tell us where do you start? What do you look for? What do you change? What do we do when we start in the bathroom?
Well, I mean, I would argue that you would look at probably your most commonly everyday used products. So, you've probably been around long enough to hear that the deodorant can be harmful because of the
Yes.
aluminum content. So,
Yes.
deodorant is a great one. Shampoos, hair, body cleansers, body lotions, again, like we said earlier, are huge because they're going to go all over your body, a body lotion. Anything, facial moisturizers that you may be using on a daily basis, believe it or not, um, even, trying to use less dyed, colored sheets and towels and so forth, because there are things that they put in that to set the color, that then when your skin, the one thing about your skin is when it's wet, it absorbs things better. So that's where you get, when you get into the fragranced body washes, again, not only are you absorbing it from your nasal passages, but again, you're absorbing more on wet skin. So that would be probably and it's really, honestly, you'd be surprised with that Yuka app. I've learned that it's really not too hard to replace those everyday items. I mean, again, I found hairsprays, and you don't have to be rubbing coconut oil, and like we don't have to go back to the woods to stay clean, if you will. But that everyday place in the bathroom would probably be the things that you think about that you're applying on your body. And the more surface of your body that's coming in contact with it, the more obviously exposure that you're getting from that ingredient or that set of ingredients. And if it's got a barcode on it, it can give you the advice. And then when you walk into the kitchen, and this is where I know it's so difficult, especially for young college kids and younger children, but this thing that we have going on where all we drink from water from is from water bottles. BPA and the other ingredients that are in plastics is probably one of the most huge endocrine disruptors there is. So and the softer the plastic is, so you think about those water bottles that you can kind of scrunch in your hand,
Yeah.
the worse they are. And specifically BPA likes to release when it's warmed. So I've always said, think about the distribution centers and so forth that these water bottles sit in, these cases sit in. They're not kept refrigerated. So they've, and I live in the South, so that they're in a 100-degree warehouse somewhere until they're put on the forklift and brought to, the store. And so replacing the water bottles, how I use mason jars. And I mean, again, that seems silly, but I'll, if something comes in a jar, I save it, wash it, put in the dishwasher, or whatever you want to do, because they're great food storage containers. And that's the next layer behind the water bottles is food storage containers. And when you're taking your food and then putting it into the microwave, or you're buying something that comes in a plastic container and you put it in the microwave, then there's another big exposure. And that can be happening to people, again, on a daily basis, because they're grabbing the water bottle, they're throwing their lunch in the plastic container, they're heating it in the microwave, and that is, maybe a daily habit, which is disrupting their hormones.
Wow. And is it the prolonged exposure to that causes a problem? Like you wouldn't heat something up in the microwave and drink out of a water bottle and then necessarily feel something,
Right,
right? Is
right.
this it's the elongated exposure to it, or how does that work?
It really varies from person to person. I mean, some people are just more prone to having and exhibiting side effects from toxic exposure. Some people can tolerate those things better than others. Lots of times, when it comes to hormones, yes, it is a cumulative effect, but like we know, we're not the same from 1 minute, 1 hour to the next. And so maybe it's not necessarily that it's gonna, you're not gonna grow horns or your arm's not gonna fall off, but you're moody, you're tired, your PMS is worse, your periods are heavier. So there's and I hate to say it, but it's affecting men too, and
Oh,
boys.
that
You
was my
know?
next question. Is this stuff affecting men just the same?
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially those plastics. That there's a word that's called xenoestrogens, and they're like they get into the body, and men have some estrogen. They don't have as much as men as women, but they get into the body, and the body thinks they mimic estrogen, and yet they're not. They're a toxic chemical. So that that can drive people's, like I say, drive women's periods, and it can drive men's. It's men's testosterone is going down dramatically. I don't know if dramatically would be the word you would use it, but anytime a young man's testosterone is going down, to me is dramatic. From having three sons, that's
Right.
not normal. So it may, like I say, we as a society, we think of the big things, that are, we have green mucus coming from our nose, that means we're sick or not well. But there are all these little things that are affecting people, that maybe it's not necessarily that it's an accumulative effect of an immediate infertility issue or direct period issue, but maybe it's affecting their relationships with their friends and family and so forth, before they get to that point that they are now trying to reproduce and aren't able to, or their periods have finally, and like we were talking about, so many women endure horrendous periods and don't say anything. And if you have some sort of obstacle to getting into healthcare, then you may not have anyone that you could talk to about that. And the fact that we have to just keep pushing on, when we have to literally run into the bathroom and change the tampon every hour, or a pad, or and the girls having to go to play sports and so forth. Those are the kind of effects that they may not realize could be coming from those exposures.
Wow. Yeah, listen, horrendous periods. I've been there. I know that firsthand, and I know a lot of listeners have as well. And it goes back to, it's just one of those things that isn't, we're not educated the best on. And we feel like well, this is normal. This is how I bleed, right?
Absolutely.
This is how I feel. I'm a raging asshole for 10 days leading up to it. And that just must be the way that it is. And the older that I'm getting, the more that I'm learning that actually that is so completely not normal. That is that the masses are abnormal. How is that happening? Like, how are so many women experiencing such mass amounts of abnormality?
Well, first and foremost, let me say too that I forgot to mention that personal care products include tampons and pads. And there are terrible chemicals on the cottons that are in the tampons. And again, imagine you're putting that in that mucosal tissue,
Ugh,
sitting in there. So sorry, I had to say that. Um,
please.
but then, second of all, I think that I had a firsthand experience of working in a medical practice, and it's only gotten worse. And I think it's probably part of why I was a-okay to leave that behind, because I cared so much about my patients, and I saw most of my patients were young women. And this whole, you got to see them every 7 minutes, I think is the average time now. There's so much to cover in that time, and I'm a healthcare provider for women, so imagine, we need to cover safe sex. Has anyone harmed you? Have what have your exposures been? Are you safe at home? How are you eating? What's your stress level, and how are you tolerating that? And then the overall, I got to actually examine someone and tell them the what's and whys of this examination. And if they come in for a problem visit, it's even a shorter amount of time, believe it
Wow.
or not, than an annual exam. But that's why it's also being left behind, because there's no time to talk to anyone that you can really actually trust and be in a private safe space, because a lot of that stuff can be difficult for people to talk to, because it is so unusual to talk about.
I want to pause here just for a second to again challenge you to share this episode with at least one woman in your life. Heck, I'm going to take that challenge up a notch or two by knowing that you are likely involved in a community of women, whether it's online or in person. Maybe you are surrounded by women where you work, or maybe you've got a friend group with that group chat that, you know what, we don't want to get that stuff leaked. I challenge you to share this episode with one of those groups. Because when women are educated and empowered through real information from trusted sources, we can make simple yet really effective changes in our life to reclaim our health. All you gotta do is click the share button or click on the 3 dots in the top right-hand corner, hit share episode, and send it to this group. A really simple act could make a really big difference in another woman's life. Yeah, you're no sooner in the door, you're rushed right back out. And then it's really discouraging because you don't feel heard. And then you go home and you Google things. And of course, that tells you the worst possible thing. And it's just this domino effect. And I think it's great that platforms, particularly like TikTok, I'm not sure if you're on that or not, but like it's just humanized these conversations where women are talking about it and saying, hey, here's what I've got going on. Here's what I found. Here's what worked for me. And it's almost like this uh, organic piecemealed way of learning about your body and finding what works for you. And it's sad that it has to be that way, but thank goodness we have women and people that are willing to speak up and say like, hey, here's what I've got going on. Here's what I've learned. I want to give it to you too.
Yeah, yeah. And see, in my generation, we didn't have that.
Right.
We didn't have that. And even in medicine, I don't even remember the point in medicine when social media came out, but it was not available, and not everyone has a smartphone. And so there's a lot of, and then I think you can go down that rabbit hole too, right? Like, oh, this is me, and then you're forgetting about, like, what we were just talking about, is that you may have all of these exposures that are actually the reason that you're having all these symptoms, that if you could become educated on those, changing some of those practices, those may help relieve you. And in the early days of medicine, we fix everything with the birth control pill.
Right.
You have bad periods, get on the pill. Like, and I'm not saying that isn't very helpful to some people, but we didn't talk about all these health practices, which is the other cool thing about social media and so forth. And that's where I my voice isn't very loud yet, but why I say, and the people that I follow on social media are people like myself who are licensed healthcare providers, to say, listen to me. Like, I am following science when I say these things, and I am reading studies to tell you that these things are changing you. And I'm not trying to sell you something. If anything that I would ever do is I would be offering my support, in a better way than what you can get from your general practitioner.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we need, right? Is women like you that are advocating on a whole new way, right? Because there now are there naturopathic doctors and different types of, places that you can go where they do spend time with you, right? Like, I'm going to guess that now you're hearing women, you're sitting down with them. Like, there is time. We're not punching a clock and seeing how many heads we can see today, but it's really about like, let's actually help these women, right?
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate because the where I've always had this dilemma, because my business is a luxury business, and aesthetics is a luxury expense, and where I'm trying to bridge that gap with patients is to say, listen, I know there is a fee, and I know you pay an exorbitant amount. Most people pay way too much for the healthcare that they're being given. Sorry, not sorry, but it's true.
Yeah.
And then when I am asking for a large amount to cover my time to spend with them, they draw sort of back, and slowly but surely people are recognizing that I'm going to spend an hour with you. I'm going to spend an hour with you, and I cannot tell you the wider range of people that I've spoken to, from people that aren't even beginning any hormonal change, all the way to people that are way postmenopausal, that people that have brain issues, period issues, weight issues, all those sort of things. And it takes a lot of effort to drill down into that. And then now we have, the option for actually doing some evaluation to see the significance of maybe how this stuff has affected your body, meaning toxins. Because, like I said, some people can sort of get away with it, if you will. And then some people are really now having a lot of physical symptoms because of their various exposures.
Yeah. And you mentioned a few physical things earlier, but could you give us some examples of like how might you know that you have a hormone disruption happening? What are some physical or mental symptoms?
So I guess not to confuse the conversation, but again, we do live in a toxic world.
Right.
And so we certainly, as women, and I would say that the endocrine disruptors, you'll most likely notice that more reproductively. And even as far as you are aging, we know in the wellness world that uterine fibroids are even caused by endocrine disruptors. So you can like truly have, very physical ailments that can be treated. But normally it is that overt PMS. The PCOS is something that's kind of complicated, polycystic ovarian syndrome. That's when someone is more androgen dominant. But you can imagine that's already, and these girls can get labeled, almost pubescent, that they have this. You really start to notice this as they start to have periods. And then imagine if you're throwing endocrine disruptors on someone that you already know is endocrine is steroid hormone compromised or challenged. So I would say that the PMS and the heavy periods are probably the biggest things, and then from there, then it starts to develop into more of those actual physical characteristics that can change, that end up with women getting hysterectomies, because maybe they have controlled that period bleeding for a long time with the pill or an IUD or so forth, but they haven't really dealt with their lifestyle, and so now they're coming off of that, and or it's not working. And so I mean, hysterectomies are an OBGYN's bread and butter, right behind delivering babies, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, because it's life changing for people. Because again, now you have women that are bleeding all month long, but that part of the conversation isn't being had. It's only the okay, now you're a surgical client, and we'll take your uterus out and that will go away. And it's been proven that women who have a hysterectomy normally do go through menopause maybe a year or two earlier, even though they say that there is no change to your hormones. It's that's a fact.
Right. Wow. It's just, I feel like I could talk to you about this all day long because it's just so interesting. I'm a PCOS gal. Okay. So recently diagnosed, took me a really long time to get that diagnosis. But it's like, what's the treatment?
Oh,
Lose weight, exercise, sleep, or go on the pill, or a combination of any of those things. And it's like, well, if I could lose weight, I would have already done it. But that's part of PCOS is
exactly.
weight just latches onto you like it's your only lifeline. And when you think about hysterectomies, I have someone very close to me in my family that had one, and it's really helped her. And there's other way, I don't know, it just feels like it's so extreme in some cases. In some cases it's very necessary, like you said. I'm also not knocking it because it is life changing.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like it goes from like 3 to 10, right? Like, why are you bleeding so heavy is my question. Like,
Right.
what is the root cause? What is causing my body to do this when it's so unnatural? And why is the only solution to put me on birth control or to cut it out?
Exactly.
That's where I get a little bit wound up, because I'm like, where is the middle ground? That's what we're missing as women, is the middle conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think when you start to develop to it's just like everything in medicine. When you start to develop disease, we all have to remember that that's what physicians, and again, they are very, very necessary in our world, and when we need them, but they are trained to treat disease, and OBGYNs are trained to be surgeons. And, because I had all of my children with midwives, because I view birthing, as long as it goes and continues normally, that it stays normal, and there is no place for a physician in that room. And because when you need the physician is when you need a cesarean section.
Right.
And again, that is a brilliant addition because women died in childbirth, but we've over medicalized that whole process as well, and back to PCOS. I mean, insulin resistance is huge in our population all the way around, and I think controlling the insulin resistance piece is probably your biggest challenge. Um, and what that makes me think of is another very important piece of the puzzle that we forget, which is that we are this big spaceship for all of these bugs that I mentioned live on the outside, but they also live on the inside. And we're discovering there is a project called the Human Microbiome Project that is studying this, the National Institute of Health, and it's every year we're learning a new bug that is keeping us alive. And when I talk to people a lot about weight and insulin resistance, and that's another thing that you probably don't get normally evaluated for when you go for your annual exams, is insulin resistance. It's like, do you have diabetes? Do you have disease, or do you not? When you're in the gray, next. And insulin resistance is huge with a lot of people. But that gut balance and testing the gut microbiome, even though we have some limitations with that, discovering the bacteria that we can look at will tell us some of where your deficiencies, and this can be you as a whole, man, woman, young, old, underweight, overweight, symptoms, not symptoms, but that's how we can learn how to feed those guys, because we know that it will show up that some of them are not being fed properly, and that sometimes we have that leaky gut phenomenon, which then comes into that other toxic exposure, like I mentioned, from foods. We are one of the few countries that allows Roundup to still be used, and glyphosate in general, and it's ubiquitous. And our gluten molecules have our gluten plant and wheat plants have been GMO'd such that it's very difficult for us to digest them. And so then the toxins that we're exposed to, and let's just pick on glyphosate for the sake of this piece right now, is then leaching out into the entire system, because it's only one cell layer thick in your digestive tract. And so now that's creating this inflammation throughout the body that is also creating insulin resistance, because the body is not used to seeing all of these harmful things. And then that, again, in turn causes the issues with the brain fog and the difficulty losing weight and in endocrine disruption, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So healing the gut is, they say even with menopause or any wellness program that you want to go on, any wellness health journey, if your gut is, no pun intended, I like to talk shit. If your gut is shit, then you're not going to feel better, and it's hard. I've checked mine off and on, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. But what I do like, and part of the reason I do check it, is to say, okay, should I still be taking this supplement? Which is something that I think can be very difficult for people, because there's so much out there, and this person says take this and that person says take that. But the gut piece is, and being able to evaluate, and you do that from a stool sample. You do it at home and you mail the test in, much like some of the colorectal cancer screening tests, and then I get the report back, and then I sit down with the client and talk to them about what their gut is telling me. Sometimes it may even tell me that they have, an overabundance of yeast. It may tell me that they have some food sensitivities. It will definitely tell me if they have that condition called leaky gut. And then I can put them on, a proper healing journey before we ever even talk about their hormones. Because if that's mucked up, they're still not going to feel good. The hormones I still think are going to prolong a woman's life, but I think to live and feel her best and have the energy and the thought patterns and the libido and all of those things may not be there, even with the hormones, if the gut isn't healed.
So the gut is really the foundational piece to look at, work on, and heal. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It certainly is, a cornerstone, especially if someone is starting to have those physical symptoms of I'm not feeling well. I'm not able to perform like I want to, in my daily social and professional responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. I, again, as a long-term gut health um, challenger here, I've had gut issues for 25 years of my life and recently did one of the stool tests, which fun friends. You get to literally shit in a container and scoop in your own poop. So it's not glamorous, I'll be honest with you, but my God, does it tell you so
Right.
much about yourself? And you might be interested to know I am I have a histamine intolerance. I have
Uh-huh.
such a substantial overgrowth of histamine in my gut and a pretty significant imbalance in my microbiome. So, too many of the bad guys, not enough of the good guys. And all of that has just flared my body in so many different ways that it feels like the insulin resistance, you can't even touch it. The hormone balance, you can't even touch it. Like, it's like you have to get through these layers to even get to the place where the body can repair it. And when the gut is consistently, for lack of better terms, on fire,
Mm-hmm.
everything's ablaze when your gut is out of whack.
Absolutely. And the first time you ever even get exposed and your gut microbiome starts is in childbirth,
Yeah.
when you're born. And then breastfeeding, if I wasn't breastfed, and if you didn't, that's part of another way you get the microbiome from your mom between her skin and the breast milk. And then it occurred to me, I'm working on some publications, and it occurred to me that I was fed from plastic bottles,
Yeah.
plastic nibbles. So I mean, that's that to me makes, like I say, you've got that person who can get away with it, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe they are just running on, pure coffee and sugar. But there's also a lot of people who just say, I don't feel good. And you think this could have started all the way from the time that they were a child.
Wow.
And which is mind-boggling to me to think, and as that relates back to the gut, right?
Yeah.
And then this idea that, again, that we don't have anyone that is really championed to us as Americans in our food industry, and I mean, the everything industry. I mean, I love capitalism, but it's just wish that there was a little bit more of some safety parameters of what they're exposing us to in the sake of having all that we want to have.
Absolutely. So how do we, as we kind of round out here today, how do we repair our bodies or begin to do that when we are just consistently exposed to so many of these toxins? How do we start to feel better when it's surrounding us?
Well, the body always seeks balance, homeostasis. There's no question that your body is seeking that for you already. And it is a journey. It is not something, and I think that's the biggest thing is my health journey began probably 15 years ago. I do, and there is some controversy about this, but I like a program, and I like that we call them detox programs, because we really do believe, we being the healthcare, the wellness gurus and experts, and that there are some of us, and see, I've done genetic testing to know that I don't methylate, which means since I don't methylate, I don't detox well. And I don't take in B vitamins, which is another thing that can cause hormone imbalance. And we don't test young women for that. No one will test you for that. And it's about a $10 test, blood test. But and yet then how do you filter out all the noise to pick one of these programs, right?
Right.
You just choose some physicians and some healthcare providers that are some of the big gurus that will make recommendations, or you use someone like myself who's using companies that I've vetted, that I believe is a real detox reset sort of program. And then you slowly start carving out those things that we know by using the Yuka app and eliminating the plastics in your kitchen, learning about safe cookware and so forth. And um, you know I I haven't been able to get away from the cute yoga clothes and going to hot yoga, but that's a huge one because you're sweating in plastic. And again, you can make yourself crazy about this stuff. But I would say that if you're lucky enough to find someone or have the ability to talk to someone and get some real hard data on yourself, I mean, that's where my dilemma is, that I wish I could say this is what everybody should do, except
Yeah.
for limiting. I do eat all organic. I truly believe in buying my meat from farmers that I know that are not exposing the animals to trauma any more than they have to be, as well as all of the antibiotics and the pesticides and so forth. And the feedlot cows are terrible for us. So I use a small regenerative farmer out of Georgia for my meat. I drink bone broth every day because we know that that is so wonderful for your gut. Those are inexpensive things. I mean, the meat is more expensive, but those don't require a practitioner, I guess, if you will. But if you can work with someone, then you may not spin your wheels going down and spending money in places. Next thing you know, you've spent the money that you could have spent talking to me, and I could have given you the proper guidance. And I tell people all the time, when they have the test like you have, that's, hey, if you drop this right now, or you decide you don't want to go with me, or I need to escalate you up further into someone that maybe is a Lyme specialist, or I think you've got exposure somewhere else, then these tests will go with you. And you can build upon those sort of things. But using smarter decisions and thinking about what you're exposing yourself to, and then we all say, trying to reduce and tolerate, I guess, our daily pace that we're required to keep, and learning to say no, particularly as women, because just in that affects cortisol, that affects the rest of your hormones. And so I think, at that, especially mothers, that's the hardest thing, because you think you're not supposed to say no to your children, and you're not supposed to say no to the PTA, and you're not supposed to say no to your boss and your husband and your bestie, the one you actually want to go hang out with and have a good time. You're not going to say no to her, but you're going to stay up till 2 a.m. drinking wine, talking about how everybody's making you crazy.
Yeah.
So I wish, I think it's just one step at a time. And if you find a good provider that listens, and I think many times, and I think this is a pretty well-known fact, that nurse practitioners like myself tend to lend an ear a little bit better, and they spend a little extra time with their patients in the health space. So if you've got a good practitioner, um, you know, coming in with lists. We talk about this a lot in menopause. Arm yourself with information, come in with this, and expect, ask for what you expect to receive from them, because they're probably not going to just offer up health information, because that's not really what they're placed for. I mean, they may be just placed there as just merely as screeners, and they may not know. And do you know that OB/GYN residents aren't being taught menopause anymore since WHI study was released?
Really?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, we always heard that the doctors got like, what was it, like 1 or 3 hours of nutrition teaching in medical school. The OBGYN residents, I don't think, are getting any menopause education
How
now.
is that possible? Because I mean, gosh, we could do a whole nother segment on menopause in its own because it really deserves that amount of time. But how is that possible? Because it's inevitable.
Well, it's just yeah, and the new that the teaching for the past 17 years or however long it's been since 2004 since WHI released is just been like, well, I guess you got to suck it up, because that stuff will, there's XYZ that is harmful, and that mantra has, unfortunately, it was not right to begin with when they released this information, and now we have all of this time to reestablish that this data was incorrect, was certainly reported incorrect, and it was documented incorrect, and then but it's not, they're going to obviously be taught that the ovaries are going to fail and these are going to be the problems because you're going to have to deal with them because there may be surgical problems, so on and so forth, but they're not being taught hormone replacement, replenishment, whatever you'd like to call it. So that's the hard part, because there's now, you and if you've had all these other maybe potential exposures like we talked about, then imagine what menopause is like. They say it's like puberty in reverse, but I would say it's puberty in reverse after living in a toxic world and maybe having two ex-husbands and some kids, and you have a lot more responsibility normally at 50 than you do at 13.
Right.
Not to say that not either side is easy, but you got to keep on. That we don't get to pull the covers over our heads at 52 when we go through menopause or whatever. I mean, you get up and you go and you push forward, and 99% of the people that I'm meeting, which didn't surprise me, are all on antidepressants. That's what they've given them for menopause. That's what they've given
Wow.
them for um, their symptoms, which drug companies love. And I don't know if you've heard or realized that they're in a lot of the larger institution medical centers that are owned, by big medical groups. Doctors are incentivized for writing prescriptions.
Yes.
So, I've always said, well, the drug companies love that, because, okay, now what could have been, estrogen, progesterone, now we've got hypertension medication, we've got depression medication, we've got cholesterol medication. And again, not that the hormones are going to mitigate all of that, but they may, when a person is doing the work on their side of being active and eating properly and all that. So it's a difficult challenge to navigate, and I think just finding people, and I'm not as active on TikTok because that's really not my generation, but I think who's real, and when it really gets to the nitty gritty of professionalism. Pick up books, read, learn from these providers. There's some really really good functional medicine doctors that are on the social media programs that have books now that tell you everything from how to eat and to how to sort of, if you will, sort of self-diagnose and self-heal yourself with really just foods and lifestyle changes.
Yeah, absolutely. My gosh. Well, I think that at least thank goodness this conversation is getting louder. It's getting more normalized. It's not such a taboo thing to talk about anymore. We've got a long way to go, but I think that we're at least headed in the right direction by having these types of conversations, by having practitioners like you, by women in general just saying, okay, enough is enough. Like, I need to advocate for myself, and I'm willing to do that. And while we've got a ways to go, we're most certainly headed in the right way. So thank you for the work that you do. It's so needed. We really just want clean, simple, direct information and guidance. Like, that's all people in general just really want, right? It's just, I'm having a problem. Can you help me?
Right.
And that's really just what it boils down to. So
Yep, yep. And I do think that I mean that's what I do and on my social media is, I'm talking to you from my kitchen and oh by the way, this is the bone broth, that I eat, and just those little tidbits and it's not a popularity contest, but I hope it's a wisdom contest, and that people know who to listen to and who not to and what their motivation is. Because I have no motivation for selling that man's bone broth. I have
Right.
the motivation for making you look and feel your very best,
Yes.
in the age of technology, now I can reach people all over too, which is nice. So they don't have to be in my backyard for me to have a relationship with them, which is super exciting.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Where are the best places that people can find and connect with you to learn more?
So I'm very active on Instagram. It's Southeast Med Angel, and I do have a TikTok, and I'm trying to try that one. And
Awesome.
because I'm excited, I think there's a space for that. And again, like I said, bringing
Absolutely.
that professional side to that. I have my own website that's unrelated from my business website, but my business website is southeastastheticandwellness.com. And my personal website is angelturlington.com, which will put up the credits of this talk that we had today, and there's that will be a way that people could direct and get an intake with me so that we could actually set up a time to have a consultation and conversation. You can do that through the office as well, but I'm trying to also create the simplicity of that just coming straight to me.
Perfect. We'll make sure that we link all of that in the show notes. And Angel, I would love to know, what does gutsy mean to you?
Oh, well, I have a sign in my office, and I wish I had been prepared for this question because fear is something I think that we every day we have to fight off. And putting yourself out there in places like this, and even on social media, is a challenge because you're vulnerable. And I would say gutsy is speaking your truth and believing what you say, and I'm grateful for people like you who value that.
Absolutely. Likewise, we value you too for coming in and sharing your time and your experiences and even just the simple techniques that can really make a big difference. So thanks so much for your time and your wisdom today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, T. Laura.
Hormones and gut. Oh my gosh. Listen, these two things are so complex, and I can tell you that they have been an ongoing challenge for me personally in my own life. And there's one thing that I can tell you that I know for sure, and that it is always worth finding the answer. You don't have to settle. You don't have to just deal with it. It might take a while, and it probably will, but the time is going to pass anyway. And you are worth looking into. You are worth feeling better. So if you're on a journey and you're feeling a little bit lost, I hope this episode not only inspired you to keep going, but gave you some answers to point you in a new direction too. I'd love to hear what you took away from today, what really stood out to you. So come find me. I'm on all social platforms at that Laura Aura. And as always, until I see you next time, stay gutsy.